First, that is measles, and that's how we land with the highest number of measles that we've had in over 35 years.
Why do you think this is happening?
Yeah, a couple of reasons why this is happening. Number one, the data has not changed. We still understand that vaccines have prevented hundreds of thousands of cases of infections, as well as hospitalizations, preventing disease and disability. But we have a climate now of mixed information, mixed messaging, as well as, unfortunately, just general confusion. We have some information coming from the highest level of offices that are changing recommendations, as we've seen with the recent executive order placed by President Trump, without any clear evidence. And the White House after that not sharing any verified evidence. That leaves parents to having to make difficult decisions based off of little confidence. And that's a big issue, because confidence is central to having this discussion about how to protect your child. And I have to say, as an emergency physician, I know very well how difficult it is to make decisions about risk when you have emotions and fear involved into it. And I think that's what many parents are experiencing right now.
So is there anything parents can do if their kids have already been vaccinated?
Number one, staying aware. You know, you can type into your local search bar an ABC measles map, and you can check to see what the coverage is in your area to understand what your risk is, especially if you're about to travel. Before school starts, you want to make sure to check the destinations that you're going to understand the endemic diseases, to make sure that your child is protected. And then I think it's so important to understand about talking to your friends, providing this information, sharing your experience. A lot of the times with misinformation, it often exaggerates the rare risks associated with these vaccinations, and it minimizes the real risk associated with these diseases. So it's so important to understand the reality, look at the data, and talk to trusted providers that you would trust with treating those infections and their complications.
Dr. Darian Sutton, as always, thank you. Straight ahead, staying sharp at the beach, the latest on a rise in stingray encounters and how you can stay safe.
Este regreso a clases, manda dinero a casa por WhatsApp con Félix. Entra a felixpago.com y empieza tu envío por WhatsApp.
Secret to whole mouth protection? Crest kills 99% of bacteria.
Streaming on Disney Plus and Hulu.
It all started with this sudden arrival of a baby.
How can a child be missing for 40 years?
The woman behind the headline, Baby Holly.
2020, Friday on ABC.
Glad you're streaming with us. Well, now to a warning that stings. We're being told that stingray attacks are actually on the rise on both coasts now. So if you're headed to the beach, you want to see what Sam Champion has here on why a growing number of unsuspecting beachgoers are feeling it.
Large groups or fevers of stingrays are on the move from coast to coast. Southern California is seeing a significant increase in the number of beachgoers stung by the barbs found on the tails of stingrays. Jake Heyman was injured at Bolsa Chica Beach while trying to learn to surf during a vacation.
What at first I thought was like a sharp piece of glass or like a stick or something. Stabbed me pretty good, checked out my foot, and it was bleeding pretty good from the probably half-inch cut that I had gotten.
Bolsa Chica and Huntington State beaches reporting more than 3,100 incidents so far this year. That's twice the number reported for all of 2025.
We can absolutely see serious stingray stings, and so we could provide really warm water for patients to soak their foot in. And what that warm water does, what that heat does, is it denatures that protein-based venom, and that decreases the pain.
This one's ready to go. I need another bucket.
In Orange County Seal Beach, researchers taking to the shores using nets to capture dozens of stingrays and clipping off those sharp barbs. That's safer for humans, but the barbs are the way stingrays defend themselves. Experts say there is a reason for this surge.
Round rays like to live close to shore, they essentially enjoy the same areas that our beachgoers enjoy. They generally like the water to be a little bit warmer. When the water warms, they're
United States in September. He will be here only for
What if you could access your pay when you need it? That's why y'all need to know about Earnin. With Earnin, you can access up to $150 a day of money that you've already earned from your paycheck.
It's streaming every day.
Only on Disney Plus.
First thing on ABC News Live first.
Friday nights at 9 on ABC. True crime.
Murder mystery.
Shocking.
Sex, betrayal, lies. Bombshell.
The greatest true crime stories. 2020. Friday nights at 9.
Glad you're streaming with us. Well, some doctors say it may be a game changer for some, using esketamine to treat depression that can't be helped with antidepressants or therapy alone. Some patients are using an FDA-approved nasal spray with an active ingredient actually derived from molecules of ketamine. Our Ike Jachi shows us how it all works.
It feels like you're in the center of the universe, in the center of a rainforest, in the center of the ocean, whatever it is that you're conjuring up, and it's just fantastic.
Daphne's outlook here is completely different from how she used to always feel.
Tired, achy, empty, sad, scared. It was all so much for me to absorb that I would just shut down.
A mood that Daphne said she couldn't shake for decades.
My gosh, Life was really terrible. It was. I never would hurt myself, but I just got to the place where I said, I just don't really want to wake up tomorrow.
Growing up, however, she was just a regular kid from a regular New Jersey town. It was in her early 20s, she says, she began to feel differently. And in her 40s, where she was diagnosed with depression and knew something had to be done.
It was the first time where I felt this is too sad and too empty of a life, not being able to get off the couch, sending my son and husband at the time off to school and work, and going right back. This can't be what life is really about.
But Daphne says she would eventually find how challenging it is to manage her treatment-resistant depression.
I'd go on a medication, and then I'd start to feel better, and then I'd start to get depressed again. And then we'd raise the medication, and then that was the cycle. I'm also going to have you
Just 2 years ago, Daphne's search for answers led her to doctors Aviva and Cheryl Molina, ER doctors and sisters-in-law who had been seeing an uptick in ER psychiatric cases, particularly during the pandemic.
Patients were coming to the emergency room and their symptoms, their depression, their anxiety, their PTSD was just really out of control.
Eventually, they ran into a very familiar drug, ketamine.
Ketamine was something we had worked with in the emergency room for many years, albeit in other contexts, but we were very intrigued by what it could do for people suffering with depression, anxiety, PTSD.
Ketamine was first introduced into clinical practice in the 1960s as an anesthetic. Over the past several decades, studies have demonstrated the clinical value of the drug to control pain and the off-label use for patients with treatment-resistant depression. In 2019, the FDA then approved Spravato, a nasal spray containing the active ingredient esketamine, a derivative of ketamine, originally meant to be taken in conjunction with an oral antidepressant. Early last year, it became the first and only FDA-approved standalone drug for TRD.
One of the largest studies, and also most recent, focuses on Spravato. After the first 4 weeks of treatment, 70% of the participants had a response to treatment, which means they had a 50% decrease in their symptoms.
The ER doctors now run several clinics administering Spravato. So what does a typical appointment look like when someone's about to be administered the esketamine?
They fill out a quick little form to let us know how they're doing. The nurse comes and does vital signs, make sure that it's safe to administer the treatment that day.
What are they actually going through during that moment?
It's a sort of dissociation. So they feel a little detached from reality. Typically, it's a dreamlike, restful state.
I'll never forget the first time they gave me not a full dose, a starter dose, to see how it would react. So I took this stuff and I was like, Jesus, man. I was like Alice in Wonderland. I woke up from it and I was like, this is very intense.
Dr. Jim Elwood, now in his 70s, says he's lived with depression since high school.
It really came to a head in college. I was ready to leave. And I went to the student counseling, telling them I wanted to help find like a job, something I could do if I left school. And right away, I'm like, I really want you to talk to someone.
And did you try to talk to anybody at that time?
No, I was embarrassed about it. I didn't understand it, so I didn't want to talk about it. I was at the point like, what am I going to do? I don't know. I'm going to just have to learn to live with this. This is life. This is who you are. I didn't see a way out.
Dr. Elwood says there's a long history of mental illness in his family. He began taking medication for his depression at 30, but like Daphne and so many others, he says it never addressed the root of his issues.
We tried so many different things, and either I had side effects or they didn't work.
Okay, time for your second dose.
He knew about ketamine's medical use as an anesthesiologist, but never tried it. But when he was first given Spravato 40 years later, he says everything changed.
I was feeling like this is very different. I'm able to see myself in a different light. I mean, I had a very negative self-image, and I was able to say, wait a minute, why am I being like that? Why am I seeing it that way?
The exact way Spravato works is unknown, but the doctors say esketamine and intravenous ketamine work differently than traditional oral medications.
It actually increases the amount of glutamate in the brain. And what that does is it promotes a process where more neural connections are being made. So people are able to find new pathways, reframing old ways of thinking. They're able to kind of get unstuck from ways that have troubled them or provided, mental health challenges.
A new lens on life.
Exactly.
Once they get their doses, the patients are monitored for 2 hours by the doctors to address any side effects. The most common being dissociation, high blood pressure, dizziness, and nausea. But waking up on this day, Daphne and Dr. Elwood describe seeing something completely different.
I see colors and I see patterns and they're moving.
I see a lot of geometric things, beautiful geometric designs. I can't describe them. I also have this feeling of sinking, like a positive way, like letting go and floating.
I just breathe normally.
And while the doctors say they've seen positive effects, esketamine treatment only comes after thorough health screenings and isn't the same for everyone.
I ensure that there's no existing, what we call medical contraindications or reasons the patient should not be getting this treatment from a medical standpoint. From a psychiatric standpoint.
Never stops, and neither do we. You can find us anywhere you stream live news, and if you're on the go, we're on the ABC News app and abcnews.com. I'm Kira Phillips. Glad you're streaming with us. A lot more news up next. Don't go far.
Picture this: sleeping bag, living room, and Domino's new s'mores lava cakes.
Este regreso a clases, manda dinero a casa por WhatsApp con Félix. Entra a felixpago.com y empieza tu envío por WhatsApp.
Her case is putting postpartum psychosis in the spotlight, but will a jury buy it as a defense for murder? I'm Kira Phillips from our nation's capital. It's Tuesday, August 18th. Right now on ABC News Live, Lindsay Clancy's mental state under scrutiny as her attorneys present their case. The latest from court this hour. Work of fiction or admission of guilt? Prosecutors use Keefe D's own words against him as testimony continues in the Tupac murder trial. The chat that won't help you cheat. OpenAI unveils ChatGPT for teens and homework as scrutiny grows over the impact this technology has on our kids. And the deadly explosion in Toledo after a blast at an industrial site in Ohio. ABC News Live starts right now. Crisis or calculated? That's the question the jury is now considering as testimony continues in Lindsay Clancy's murder trial for killing her 3 kids. Court resuming any moment after a recess with more defense witnesses. We're tracking it. Earlier, though, we did hear emotional testimony from the defendant's former mother-in-law, Susan Clancy, questioned about Lindsay Clancy's interactions with her kids, but also her struggles with insomnia and postpartum depression. Susan at one point saying her daughter-in-law was begging for help.
Did you find that Lindsay was interested at all trying to get better and see doctors?
Very much so.
Did you find at all any of it with your observations of Lindsay as to whether or not she was often help to just spurn it and not see doctors and not have
She was
treatment?
begging for help.
Lindsay Clancy has pleaded not guilty to murder after strangling 5-year-old Cora, 3-year-old Dawson, and 8-month-old Callan in January of 2023. Her defense attorneys arguing she's not criminally responsible because she was in the throes of postpartum psychosis. Let's bring in our Peter Haralamas, who's following the trial for us, along with Leo contributor Bernardo Villalona. So, Peter, what can we expect as the court resumes?
Yeah, Kira, the jury at this point hearing from the 7th defense witness. This comes after a really critical morning of testimony, not only from the former mother-in-law, but also the first expert. This afternoon, we're expected to hear from more of these experts who evaluated Clancy's medical records, as well as a psychiatrist who treated her. The last witness that the jury heard from, Donald Condi, really a critical voice. He reviewed all of those medical records, and to that defense point about Clancy seeing multiple medical providers, about there appearing to be some gaps in terms of her treatment because she was seeing different people, Condi effectively pointing out that there might have been some missed warning signs, that Clancy was showing signs of potential psychosis, that she was hallucinating. All of these points really key to her defense.
So, Bernarda, how critical was that testimony from the psychiatrist, Dr. Donald Condi?
So the testimony from the defense expert, Dr. Condi, is critical to the defense, because remember, this case doesn't fall as to whether she actually killed her kids. That's completely not an issue in this case, but whether she had the requisite mental state to be able to do it. Now, this expert has already testified in conflict to what the prosecution has put forward, and this expert has been able to show the signs of how the original doctors that evaluated Lindsay missed those signs, and also that she was going through a psychosis that none of them were able to pick up on. Also, this expert was able to say that, number one, that the notes were lacking as to these medical doctors that looked at her, but also that he would not have prescribed the medication that they had prescribed, so they had missed the signs. So this is crucial, because in the end, it's going to come down to this expert testimony, which the jury is going to ultimately try to make sense of in order to reach a verdict in this case.
So, Bernarda, with family members describing Lindsay as loving, nurturing, a mother who desperately was asking for help, what does the prosecution have to do to counter that narrative and convince jurors that her mental health struggles, do not explain or excuse what happened?
So they've done a little bit in the sense of the cross-examination. I believe one of the cross-examination questions that the prosecutor had asked of, I believe it was the sister, said, well, if she told you that she was thinking about harming her kids or harming herself, aren't you a reporter, a mandatory reporter? Why didn't you say anything to anyone? Why didn't you report this to try to prevent any harm from actually taking place?
So the prosecution, of course, is acknowledging, number one, that they're family members. Number two, they're already acknowledging that she had a mental issue. But number three, the question is, how far did that mental issue go? Was she suffering a psychosis at that time? Also, they were able to get in through these family members that she seemed better before the day of the incident of January 24th of 2023, hence saying that she didn't suffer psychosis on that day.
Bernarda, Peter, thanks guys. We'll be tracking it all afternoon. So it's a landmark trial that could change social media forever. Meta back in court again today, but this trial might be the biggest one yet. 4 states are suing the social media giant in federal court, alleging it knowingly contributed to the youth mental health crisis by deliberately designing features to get children addicted. Meta vehemently denies these claims, saying that evidence at trial will show its commitment to supporting young people. Let's get right into it. Technology reporter Mike Dubusky, also legal contributor James Sample. So Mike, kind of take us back and explain how we got here.
Yeah, of course, Kira. So this is a case that accuses Meta, which is the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, of intentionally designing addictive features and then integrating them into Facebook and Instagram. What these 4 state attorneys general are arguing is that these features, when we're talking about here specifically, are things like endless scrolling, where you just scroll and never reach the bottom of your feed. Also, things like push notifications, which, some studies have shown to correspond to a dopamine release in your brain, maybe wake you up in the middle of the night and disrupt your sleep. All of that cumulatively at scale has had a negative mental health impact on Meta's customers, and they say that that is illegal. That's why they are taking this company to court. This was actually a lawsuit that was filed all the way back in 2023 by more than 30 state attorneys general, now coming to trial now, and it does represent a pretty existential threat for Meta when you consider that this is just one of many legal challenges that this very prominent social media company is facing.
Exactly, and James, let me take that to you. Because of these similar cases, multiple of them actually in recent months, how could that impact this trial?
Well, it's a really important question, Kira. I mean, as Mike said, the scale of these cases and the fact that there are so many of these cases and so many states bringing these cases, it is essentially the case that the entire market value, market capitalization of Meta is effectively at stake, and maybe even more than that if you think about all of the cases that are yet to be brought. So given that Meta has already suffered a couple of losses this year, including a couple of weeks ago in New Mexico on a very similar, not identical, but very similar fact pattern, it becomes increasingly difficult after you lose multiple cases to argue on appeal that the judge got it wrong, that the jury missed some important facts. When the pattern starts going against Meta, that becomes hugely problematic, particularly given the scale and the scope of damages that the states are seeking.
So James, what about the penalty here, though? I mean, what is Meta looking at if it loses? And is there a point where these lawsuits could actually make a dent in their profits?
Oh, I think that the lawsuits can do more than make a dent in their profits. I think that these lawsuits are an existential crisis for the company, Kira. And the other thing is, it's not just money that's at stake. And New Mexico is kind of a template for this already. The judge, and this is also true in the case that's being tried right now in Oakland, the judge has control over the remedy. And the plaintiffs are not just seeking money damages. They are seeking remedies that address some of the very dynamics and practices that Mike just referenced. They are seeking, in essence, to put the courts and the states in the role of oversight and regulation. What is particularly profound when you think about that, Kira, is that legislation has been stalled in Congress along those very same lines for years, and yet these court cases could deliver that kind of legislation.
During the trial, do you think that Mark Zuckerberg will actually testify?
Yeah, very possibly. We've seen this in past cases involving Meta around some of these same questions as well. So Mark Zuckerberg could could very well make an appearance, as could Adam Nasseri, who is, of course, the head of Instagram. We are expecting this trial to last several weeks, 6 or 7 weeks or so. And again, you have to consider the mounting legal costs. Even if we put aside the fines here, Kira, according to Meta's recent disclosures, they actually spent $2.4 billion on legal expenses alone in the second quarter of the second quarter of 2026, I should say, the last quarter. And that means that, you know, in addition to the fines, in addition to the potential changes they might need to make to their platform based on some of the outcome of these cases, just the legal cost alone is starting to add up for this, again, very prominent tech company.
James, Mike, thanks. We'll keep tracking the trial. So who ordered the hit and why? For nearly 3 decades, that question has haunted the world of hip-hop. Now we're following the second day of testimony in the trial of the only man ever charged in Tupac's murder. Inside the courtroom, Las Vegas prosecutors are laying out their case, alleging that Dwayne, this guy right here, Keefe D. Davis, orchestrated the shooting, but did not pull the trigger. The defense acknowledging, though, that Davis did admit to his role in the killing in a book published in 2019, but says it was a false confession. Tupac was shot and killed near the Vegas Strip after a boxing match in 1996. Davis has pleaded not guilty. Joining me now, Alex Stone, and also our legal analyst, Brian Buckmeyer. So, Alex, pretty graphic autopsy photos shown in court today. And I know that members of Tupac's family were actually there in the courtroom, right?
Yeah, they got up and walked out. The first group of family members getting up and walking out, Kira, when pictures of the body bag were shown, and then it became more graphic. Not everybody in the courtroom could see all of the photos, but when they got into photos of the actual body and the bullet wounds and the entrance wounds and exit wounds, then other family members got up and walked out. But these are graphic photos as the prosecution begins to lay out their case and say, here is how it was carried out. Here is how the investigation was carried out, as well as defense attorneys are already trying to say that this was a botched police investigation and that police did not conduct it correctly. So they are saying that this is how investigators did it. This is what they found, and today those autopsy photos were shown.
So, Brian, the defense is focusing on, bits of information that witnesses actually can't remember, like not knowing the caliber of the bullets. Will these small inconsistencies actually amount to reasonable doubt?
Well, sure. Unfortunately, in most cases, are not like we see on TV or like Johnny Cochran, when you say, hey, put on the glove. If the glove doesn't fit, you must have quit, and that's the whole case. In crime analysis of reasonable doubt, like most defense attorneys do, one step at a time. And those steps might be small, but it appears the defense is hoping that small inconsistencies, small facts that can't be remembered or rehabilitated through the investigation because it is 30 years old, that drives enough daylight between fact and allegation, enough to show the jury that there's reasonable doubt that this investigation was thorough and that it yielded the right results. And if the investigation is flawed, then the suspect that they have, KPD, is not the person. And I think we've seen over the decades in this case the multiple theories and suggestions that other people had roles in the death of Tupac Shakur. If those can be planted in the jury's mind, I think the defense gets that much closer to the not guilty they're hoping for.
Brian, Alex, thanks, guys. And if you want to dive even deeper into the trial, ABC News Live has a new multi-platform show featuring Brian. You can watch Burden of Proof right here on ABC News Live every day, 5:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. Eastern. You can also watch it on demand on Disney+, Hulu, or wherever you listen to your podcast just by searching Burden of Proof. So no talks with Iran. That's the word from President Trump today about the stalled negotiations. And as he doubles down on a threat against a U.S. ally in the region, Iran is again firing at neighboring countries, including the United Arab Emirates. The country says its air defenses detected at least 2 missiles fired from Iran, marking what appears to be the first time Iran has fired missiles directly at the UAE in several months. White House correspondent Karen Travers joins us now. So Trump says no talks are happening, but if Iran is firing at neighbors again, could that elicit a strong response once again from the president?
It certainly did when we saw this happen weeks ago, Kira. That was before the United States was really going on offense in July, with nearly 2 weeks of nights of consecutive strikes against Iran, where Iran then was the one retaliating against U.S. assets and allies in the region. It is not clear at this point. There's been no response from the White House to this latest strike, if there would be some action. But I think it's important to note that it's been relatively quiet, that we haven't seen any strikes by the United States this month after so much activity activity when things got really heated back in July. The president, though, in terms of the status of negotiations, made it very clear in that social media post that there's nothing happening right now. He said there are no talks or conversations happening now or scheduled in the future. Bit of a different message than what we heard from his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was in the region yesterday. He has, of course, acted as one of the top negotiators for the administration in recent months. He said that there are actually some robust negotiations, conversations happening between the two countries. So, Kira, yet again, another contradiction between the president and what senior officials are saying about the state of play right now in terms of conversations and talks with Iran.
And Oman has been a U.S. partner in the Middle East for, decades. Why is President Trump now threatening to bomb them?
Yeah, it's a repeating of a threat that he had first issued back in May. Because of the work that Oman has been doing, trying to come up with an agreement or some plan for Iran to have some control in the Strait of Hormuz. And the president is not happy about this. There is no finalized plan. We've heard that from the Iranians. But the fact that Oman has been working with Iran on this has frustrated the president. He was asked about this in the Oval Office yesterday. He said that Oman has not been behaving well, something similar to what he had said a couple months ago. But notably, he did not take that action at that point. There was a lot of speculation about what that